I'm not seeing it on the YouTube feed for some reason, though.
That's
anyway. At least I know it's recording. So we, at the very least, will have a recording that we can put up on there. And I had a whole bunch of questions that we can go through, but hopefully some people will join our session, and we'll add some comments in the comment section. And we can also type in comments there as well. But it should be posting live here. I just don't know why it's not on the live feed from my phone. Okay. Anyway, thank you, Vanessa, for joining us. This is Medical Device Academy Live. We're live streaming on our YouTube channel, and this is the first time we've done the interview format. So hopefully we get some positive feedback from this. It looks like we already have 4 viewers and somebody giving a thumbs up here. So we must be doing something right?
Yes, definitely. Cheers to that.
Vanessa and I met about 10 years ago, back when she was 20. And I was 30, and yeah, nobody's believing that anyway. I got too much gray now. But back then, I was a BSI auditor, and I was in the greater New England area, as they like to call it. So I was in Canada. And evidently, whereas Mexico is also in the greater New England area, and Vancouver.
Yeah.
Well, they would have me go to all these places, and Vanessa was working at a company in Montreal where I had to do a certification audit, and she was new to the company, and I'll never forget, she showed me 1345 plus, and she had a spiral bound version of it, and she was using that to help her through the audit, and I was really impressed with the quality of that guidance document versus the 14969 guidance that I had been using. So I was like, this is a company that knows 1345. And so I kept tabs. And then lo and behold, I went on my own and started my own consulting business. She started her own consulting business. And now we're working together again. She's a subcontractor working with some of our clients and been doing a pretty awesome job for us. But I thought this would be a great topic to bring you in on, where we're talking about conducting your first internal audit when you're going through the certification process for 1345. And people want to know, what is 1345? That's one of the first thing they don't know. What is that? Is it required? So why don't we start there? Maybe you can give us a quick softball answer to what is 1345 and why do we need it?
Sure. And just for starters, I'm going to speak not in regulatory terms. I'll make it very simplistic and in layman's terms so that everybody can understand. So when we ask, okay, what is ISO 1345? As a company, we have to comply, or we need to meet customer requirements. So one of the standards that we quite know about is ISO 9001. It's wide across the board. It's basically the framework that you should have in place just to kind of put that level of assurance that your internal processes can meet customer requirements, can meet their satisfaction, can meet all of the above in terms of servicing. So for medical devices, it's somewhat the same analogy of that same standard. It's a standardized framework, I call it, of all the basic processes that you should have in place so that whichever medical device that you manufacture, you design, or you distribute. So that set of processes are there. And it's when a company is ISO 1345, there are some countries that it's a requirement, and there are some other countries that it's not. So it just gives that level of assurance saying, okay, well, I'm going to go see company X. They're ISO certified. So we know in terms of qualifying them and knowing their level of, not necessarily of expertise, but making sure that from one end to another, our product will be in good hands with that company. And it's you definitely know from that point on, they're being surveilled, their system is being monitored. It's not just a standalone system that lives on its own. It's constantly being monitored and being improved, and or improved. So it's just that level of insurance that a lot of companies take that approach to get ISO certified, either for a regulatory requirement, they must have it, or they want to give that level of assurance to their customers or their partners. They want to say, oh, well, how do you square off against the other companies? Well, we're ISO certified. Okay, well, that's already a nudge in favor of that company. So it's basically the Bible book of all the processes that should be in place, the required processes that should be in place in order to support the product lifeline of a medical device.
I think there were a couple of key things I think you said in there. Number one was it's only required by some countries, not all. The US is one of them that doesn't require it. But Canada is the number one that requires it by law to even apply for a license.
Correct.
Those are two exact opposites.
Correct.
But the other point I think that was really key that you mentioned was you can use it as a qualifier for new suppliers. Oh, they're ISO certified, so they're at a higher level of confidence that they're going to have the right systems in place and we can count on them as a supplier. And that's exactly how a lot of companies use it when they're evaluating contract manufacturers or suppliers of components. Are they ISO certified? Sort of gets you the fast route, fast track to being a supplier for us. And if you don't have it, we gotta come audit you, and that costs money and time. And I get this other company here that's certified. Maybe I'm just going to go with them and not even bother to come visit you.
Correct. And it's all risk-based, right? So having a company that ISO certified totally de-risks your qualification steps, or even, leveraging your resource, your processes in place. It kind of write off. And then, like you said, an on-site audit might not be required unless we're speaking about the really critical processes like sterilization and so forth. But it kind of like sets the tone of, okay, where do we grade this company in our qualification process moving forward?
Now, if I were a contract manufacturer in Canada and I wanted to be a supplier to a medical device company, and they told me you need to get ISO 13485 certified because we don't want to come do an audit of you. If I heard that enough times, I might say, this is just ridiculous.
Correct.
I'm not going to keep on going with this. I'm just going to go ahead and get ISO certified. And we got a comment here from Mary Martinez. Thank you, Mary. At what point in the lifetime of the company should they start to seek ISO 13485 certification if required or desired? So that just segues perfectly into this question. Like, when people are hearing over and over again from potential customers, if you get ISO 1340 certified, we would bring you on as a supplier. That's a clue. If nobody is saying that when they're talking to you and they're saying yes to hiring you, you probably don't need it. Mm-hmm. If the customers you're talking to are saying, sorry, you don't have it, I can't work with you, that's a clue. And it depends on who your customers are. If you're a company where 20% of your business is medical device and you're making electronics and their components, the answer might be you don't really need it. It's a nice to have. If you're making a finished device and 100% of your business is medical and they're high-risk devices, the answer might be this is table stakes. You need this to even do business with us.
Correct.
So in where that is in the lifetime of the company isn't so important. I think it's more what is your market and who are your potential customers. And I find a lot of automotive companies that think, I'm going to get ISO certified and then the business will come. That doesn't happen.
Correct.
Because they don't know the potential customers yet that want that business. But if you're talking to those people and they're saying you need this, you're in that market and you really need to up your game and offer this to do business in that place.
Correct. And I'll even add on in terms of business strategy. I mean, again, what is your potential market is one thing, but you also need to align your business strategy along with that certification, meaning that you have the adequate resource to maintain that system. Again, it's not a standalone system. You can't just get ISO certified and completely forget it and wait that eventually you're going to have customers that's going to come and feed into that process. At the end of the day, you're on a cycle to get monitored, surveilled every 3 years, and you cannot just turn to the auditor and say, we don't have any clients, so we're not maintaining the system. Big no-no. So in terms of business strategy, I've seen companies say, we wasn't quite sure, but we've been getting a lot of feedback that people would want to actually, us to get ISO certified. And a couple of years down the line, we might think about producing our own, or we might think It's not something that you just turn on the light switch and you become ISO certified. You need to, your marketing or business development team in place need to be very avant-garde and proactive to know, okay, what are the steps, and is there an actual value or return on investment for putting a system like that in place? So the way that I've seen it is not really driven by engineers, but really from management, upper management that actually understand the value behind it, short term, long term. So it's quite, there's no time switch to say, okay, well, we need it today. Well, you need to think about it maybe today, so that at the time you need it, if you need it, then it's in place and it's in pretty good shape.
Let's jump ahead. If the company's made the decision, I'm going to get ISO certified, they have a quality system in place, but it's a new quality system. At what point are they going to do their first internal audit?
Okay, well, it's not a tricky question. The moment that you have your quality system in place, regardless if you started the certification process or not, kind of jump in on a couple of things at the same time here. Internal audit should be conducted as soon as you've actually have a procedure or program in place for it, okay? So that you can actually demonstrate that your internal product program actually is effective. So I think the right question or the right approach is for maybe internal program or any process that you have in place. The moment that you make that decision and you have those processes, AKA procedures in place, you need to have the team, the dedicated team to support that. So it's the same for complaint handling. It's the same for your CAPA system. It's the heart of your whole, the health of your quality management system. So, each and every process has its actual assets, but definitely the moment you have the procedure in place, dry run it a little bit, even if you're not ISO certified, in terms of the qualified people to actually run it. Tweak it along the way if you notice, okay, we're doing a little bit too much, or we're not doing enough. Are we capturing the right things? We're not capturing the right things.
I've been trying to think of a good way to describe what the purpose of an audit is to companies that haven't been through this before. And one of the ways I was trying to think of something that all of us understand is, what if you think of it as an exam? It wouldn't make any sense for me to give you an exam as soon as I hand you the syllabus in the book. But after you've had some classes and you've done some homework, I'm not going to wait until the end of the year to give you your exam. So I'm going to give you exams as we go along in the process to check that things are effective before we get to the end of the year. So if you think of the same thing being your quality system, when I implement a procedure or a process and I start building some records, I want to audit that process to make sure it's effective. I implement another process, I want to audit that one. And everybody thinks in terms of audits being all or nothing, but you don't have to audit the entire quality system all at one time. You can audit processes individually. And in fact, it takes less time commitment, and it's a little bit easier when I'm just going to look at purchasing controls today. We're going to do an audit of purchasing controls, and I'm going to have somebody other than the purchasing department do the audit of purchasing, because they can't audit their own stuff, because other than it's not an independent auditor.
Correct.
So but it doesn't have to be an outside consultant. Now, if you are going to do this audit of the purchasing department, and I'm going to try to segue into a comment made by Matthew here. It sounds like a physical. Yes, it's a little bit like a physical, but the difference is that when you have a course at a school and you have an exam, you have a plan that's written down, the syllabus for the course, and you have a textbook that's sort of like your procedure, and this is the effectiveness check. We're checking to see your process is effective by giving you an audit. And with a physical, you don't necessarily have a written plan. If you are a world-class athlete, sure, absolutely. Just like getting a physical, it's time to benchmark your performance. So if you want to benchmark your performance, that's exactly like a physical of sorts. But in a lot of world-class athletes, they have benchmark workouts. They do, how well can I do this activity? Like maybe it's climb this mountain from here to here in how many minutes.
Correct.
But when we're doing an audit of, let's say, purchasing, doing that process audit, we could, because all the records are probably electronic, like purchase orders, and the procedure is probably a Word document, and you probably use an MRP system. And after a year and a half in COVID, everybody knows how to use Zoom now. So we could probably do the whole thing virtually and do just as good a job, because you and I can talk back and forth and see one another and ask questions and spontaneously answer. And you can say, oh, let me share my screen, I'll show you. And so you can do virtual audits and face-to-face audits just as effectively for a process where everything's electronic and on the computer screen, and you don't have to go see a physical manufacturing process.
Correct.
For software companies, that might be true too, but what do you do when you have a company that's doing sterilization? How are you going to audit sterilization at a contract sterilizer and qualify that supplier if you're doing 100% virtual?
I ran into that last year, and it was because they were their level of readiness to support remote audit. It was fairly the scope wasn't that much in depth, but it was definite. I got to see quite a lot by the different capabilities and functionalities of their technology that they were using. So it's doable, but again, we do understand it wouldn't be as thorough as if it was on site. And I'd like to add to, the analogy that you did in terms of, okay, well, what is an internal audit? I'm going to say we don't like when strangers come into our home and they feel like we're invading them. Well, internal audit, I see it as house cleaning. Somebody who's going to come to your house and pick up all your dirty secrets, your skeletons out the closet before the FDA and the inspectors come. So a lot of times we get a bad rap in terms of auditor inspectors. You're coming and they're like, they tend to panic. They don't know how to act. They think that we're here to just slap on the hand or whatever. No, we're actually coming to give you a hand so that we're coming out and showing you some of the deficiencies where they at. Of course, fact-based is not subjective. And it's an opportunity to do some house cleaning before the real ones that tend to be a little bit more punitive. So when you put it like that, people tend to be a little bit more at ease because it seems like you're on their side. Again, being totally objective, but you're on their side, as opposed to, well, I'm here to find out that you're guilty. Just show me that you're innocent. That approach is very much well appreciated in that aspect. When you look at what's an internal audit, it's a systematic review of your QMS, and I'm just here to show you, oh, you have a mouse right here, dead rat right there. Pick them up before the FDA comes. Okay, thank you, thumbs up, and we're good to go.
To use the medical analogy a little bit, we could also think of it as sort of like when you're going to med school, you don't start out with treating patients. You start out by anatomy class with cadavers. Mm-hmm. We do things a little bit more invasively and a little bit more thoroughly because it's dead. Mm-hmm. It's a cadaver, and it's a learning opportunity. So, we are allowed to make mistakes because we're new to this. Yeah. And so you should think of your internal audits. You can make mistakes in an internal audit. You should use that as a practice opportunity and figure out what works and what doesn't, and not be afraid of the internal audit. Correct. But I rarely see clients come to me for their first internal audit saying, hey, could you do a process audit of just this process because it's the first one we got in place? Instead, they want to wait till the very last minute, 10 minutes before the real thing with the certification body auditor. And that's when they want to get it done. And they're giving me it has to be on this day because I have to have it by Friday. I have no choice.
Understanding.
To do it.
Yeah, totally. So lack of understanding really of, okay, how do we go about it? And it doesn't need to be on red hot, or hot and cold. It's a living process. It's a living exercise. And you, like you said, you gain knowledge out of it. And I think it's quite important to point out, the process is not there to point the finger at a person. but it's there to point a finger at a process.
Yeah.
And that's something that must be understood, because they think, oh, it's my fault if something doesn't work. Well, it could be the process. And very most likely it's the process. A real auditor or if you have that understanding, it's always pointing back to the process and not the person, unless the person is all across the board, all over the place, and really totally not competent to do the job. That's a whole different story. But I think we need to demystify that, okay, the internal audit is to point a finger at someone. It's really just process related.
Yeah, somebody likes your analogy here too.
Who doesn't like to keep their house clean? I do.
Yeah, so I got to remember, I got to click on the ones that I want to share. I had forgotten about that. So thank you. If anybody's interested in biomedical engineering and doesn't know what biomedical engineers do, check out BME Life. That's Mary Martinez is one of our employees, and she's got a YouTube channel that she started before we even met her when she was in school. So in this particular field, we rely really heavily on biomedical engineers to design the devices, to run the companies, and we also need them for doing the regulatory submissions. You need somebody that understands the technology. And so when we look at biomedical engineering programs, that's where we get our employees from. That's where our clients get their employees from. And so if people are wondering what a biomedical engineer does, her channel is a great way to learn. But that is the lifeblood of our company. That's the lifeblood of this industry. It's biomedical engineers. I happen to be a chemical engineer, but it's because they didn't have biomedical engineering back then. I predate it. So what's I don't know what's your background. I had forgotten. I haven't looked at the resume in a long time.
Yeah, it's been years ago. But I graduated in biochemistry, and it's through a stroke of luck I ended up in quality, and I'll never forget. I'll always give it up to those two people. I think I've told you the story. I was in clinical research and then transitioned over to optimize in vitro diagnostic assays. That was back like more than 3 decades ago. And whenever I would write my report, which I thought it was fine, for years they would send me back to, no, brush it up. I wanted more quality. I want more detail, more. It wasn't a 2-liner, but I used to be so upset. Like, I wrote everything that I needed to put down, and compared to others, why are you picking on me to up my level of documentation? Lo and behold, because I was born in Canada, and I lived in the States for about 10 years. And I wanted to come back to Montreal, came back to Montreal. I was in research, clinical research. And when I came back to replace an old colleague who used to be a QA supervisor. They're like, oh, you'd be the best fit. You understand everything about the standard. I said, well, I'm in clinical research. What are you talking about? But in terms of the fit, we wouldn't be worried at all to just put you in those shoes. I said, you're kidding. No, we're correct. I came down from New York just to see them, to see if they were serious. I had just given birth. Lo and behold, got the position. Great. But never did I think I was going to be going towards quality assurance at all, because I hated it with my life. Here I am today.
Yeah.
15 years later.
Now you teach it and audit it, and you're a leader in it.
And what's interesting, you don't understand your path until later on. You just get to see, wow, I've been groomed for this for so long, although I hated it. And you can't hide what your passion or what you're good at. But they must have seen something that I didn't see. I couldn't care less for it. I'll be very honest. But life just led me down a path that it comes as second nature for me right now. And so my hat's off to those two colleagues. I think they know who they are if they're watching. And if ever, I tell them all the time. But this is how I ended up from biochemistry background to clinical research, so that end-to-end understanding of what is a product life cycle from a conception of an idea all the way to commercialization. I understand it very perfectly. And here I am in quality and regulatory activities or field. So it's quite interesting. It's quite humbling also. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go to some of our other questions here. So a company goes through their first internal audit, and what would be the next step, if they're going through their first internal audit and they want to get ISO certified, why is it important that they do that before they do that stage 1 audit? Why do they have to do it before that stage 1 audit? And what are they going to do between the audit and the stage 1 audit? What's the activity that during that time period?
Okay, well, again, all about house cleaning, right? So if you're doing internal audit, it's to identify or to make sure, do you have the necessary activities in place? Do you have the necessary procedures in place? And from that first internal audit before your stage 1, it'll help you identify if there are still some gaps before you actually go through your stage 1. So when you do your stage 1, granted that you've contracted or you've contacted the right registrar, they'll give you the step-by-step of how to go about it. But the intent of the stage 1 is to identify, do you have all the necessary required procedures in place? So it would make sense that you would do an internal audit just so that you've conducted that activity. Yep. And even be a step ahead of saying, okay, not only have we done the procedure, but we've been actually implemented our procedure. This is usually where we do those verification of the implementation of your processes at the stage 2. So I think it would be wise and diligent to do that, put that procedure in place. I used to be, well, I still am somewhat very finicky as which procedure should go first before you get to the internal audit procedure. So that it makes sense chronologically. But then again, I think the first thing that should be done would be the internal audit. The second thing that should be done, if you have any deficiencies or things that you need to address from the internal audit, would be addressing them. So usually most companies implement their CAPA procedure. And then the third would be, okay, well, share that information with management so they know their level of readiness to go into ISO certification, which is usually conducted through a management review. So these 3 things.
Why don't you repeat those, and I'll put them in the chat here. Number 1, what would you do?
Well, put your procedure in place, including your internal audit, and actually do an internal audit.
So you'd put your internal audit first?
No, not first. I would actually start with control of documentation. Controlling documentation and training should be the 2 that should come out at first.
Okay. That's number 1.
And then after that, you would actually conduct your internal audit. Once you do your audit, if there are any deficiencies or outliers or non-conformances, then you should look into implementing, using your CAPA process for it to correct those actual non-conformances. Actively correct them, actively implement so that according to the standard, they're considered and addressed without undue delay. And third, communicate those to management. And this is usually conducted through management reviews. So by the time you get to your stage 1, management has an understanding, okay, this is our level of readiness. We're good to go, or pause, let's call and postpone that stage 1 to at a later date. This is usually how I would give advice.
Number one, you had control of documents and training.
Correct.
Number 2, you have internal audits and CAPA?
Yes, definitely.
Let me write that down.
It's not set in stone, it's not written anywhere, but with experience, you get to understand how to best put these in practice so you have the supporting systems in place adequately.
Yeah, and however it formats here, it didn't show the CAPA part, but that's supposed to be internal audits and CAPA.
It's coming up.
Yeah, slowly but surely here. And then number 3 on the list here, you had management review, right?
Correct. So it goes without saying you would have a management review procedure to know how to conduct them, to what frequency, what some of the inputs that you should discuss and share with management, and then to actively make decision or recommendation to say, okay, well, as the management rep or as QA, I propose we move forward, we pause, we go ahead, whichever. So it shows not only actually that oversight that the executive management has, but also their level of implication in making those type of decisions moving forward. Not only that they're aware, they're engaged, but they're also committed. Mm-hmm. And auditors always love to see that.
When we talk with clients, because most of our clients are device companies, not contract manufacturers, and most of them are developing their first products. Usually they're focused on, we want to get our 510K first for the US, and then we'll worry about quality system stuff. They always want to push off the quality system stuff, which has some advantages and disadvantages.
Correct.
Because they're a small company and they don't have a lot of resources. Once they submit their 510K, there's a bit of time where they're, what am I going to do? And so that is a great time to take advantage of all those resources that were going into product development now can be going into the quality system. In theory, that would work great. But what often happens is they got the device far enough along that they could submit the 510K and they get the validation report, but I find they're still tweaking some things behind the scenes and getting them, we made 10 units and we got it through our validation, but we can't make 10 units consistently. So they're tweaking their production process, they're validating their production process, they're scaling things up. They made 10 parts as prototypes, now they're scaling things up to larger volume production. And so it seems like the quality system just never gets the attention. And so in hindsight, a lot of companies that have been like, can we just do as little of the quality system as we can right now and leave the rest of the quality system for later? Yeah, you can, but we find that also results in problems with a very weak supply chain. You have suppliers that you never qualified. You find out the hard way that they can't deliver.
Yeah.
If you had paid a little bit more attention to document control, maybe you wouldn't have sent the wrong version of the drawing to the supplier and they might not have made that mistake. And maybe you would have realized that supplier doesn't have validation or doesn't meet some of the requirements that you have for production controls. So it's really important to make sure that you have supplier controls in place, make sure that you have document control in place, make sure that your people are trained, and maybe you're doing supplier audits before you're doing internal audits.
Correct.
Maybe some of those things are just as important as the design risk and software validation that you were thinking, this is all I need to focus on. Maybe not. Maybe you need some of those other things too to make sure that they can make more than one good prototype.
Yeah, that everything's under control. And that's the whole intent, is to keep everything at a state of control. So you're totally correct.
I had a couple other questions here. So who can do the internal audit? So we decide, okay, we're going to do an audit of purchasing controls. Who can do that audit in your company?
Well, first off, you need to appoint or qualify people. So the qualification of your internal auditor, it's a lot about skill set, but also the personality or the character of the person. So that person needs to be, and there's actually a standard out there. I think it's ISO 1911 or something like that.
You got it.
So long ago.
In the chat.
But it kind of gives you, it walks you through how to select and qualify whichever person that you're going to use to do your internal audit. First off, it cannot be a person that's within the process. So somebody within design cannot self-audit. There's no objectivity right there. But in selecting those people, you need to make sure that they would conduct independent review. They are the level of integrity, if you want to put it like that. They need to be to some extent self-sufficient, have that eye to be a Columbo, so to speak. They're not easily swayed. Just don't look at it, and then easily convinced to do certain things. So I don't remember all the necessary requirements, but there's a standard that actually walks you through it, and you need to qualify them. So there's a couple ways that you could qualify them. Some are qualified by experience because they've been doing it, since 20 years ago, and then at the time there wasn't necessarily a course given, but leverage of their expertise, their experience, kind of give them that go to free pass to actually conduct audits as an internal auditor. Your lead auditor is your go-to person, basically. So the person who's going to lead a specific audit as far as scheduling, as far as assigning the right auditor. If ever the auditor has questions, say, oh, this is what they told me. What do you think about this? They kind of guide you through, okay, well, look into this path or whichever, and reviews your report or your findings. And it always helps if it's a specific audit, let's just say for sterilization, don't take an internal auditor that's never been exposed to sterilization process. Yep. So you want to make sure the expertise of the auditor matches the actual process that you're going to go audit. If you're looking at basic QMS system, any qualified internal auditor can look into it. But anything that's specific to the product, to the process, so sterilization, sterility testings, all the above, software. It's always good to have that third set of eyes that could pick up on other things.
I've even seen that in other processes that probably everybody knows at a superficial level. Mm-hmm. But auditors don't audit at a superficial level if they're doing a good job. If I want to audit a purchasing process, I need to actually understand how purchasing works. Mm-hmm. And so one of the biggest advantages for me is I didn't start in quality. You went into quality pretty early in your career, but myself, I actually spent a decade in R&D, and then I was in new product development and medical device, and then I was CEO of a medical device company that I started, and then I got into quality and regulatory. And in the beginning, it was one of three hats I wore. I was the operations manager, I was the engineering manager, and I was the quality and regulatory person because we only had 5 people. And one of them was sales, one of them was the inventor, one of them was actually shipping things. Okay. Up and shipping them. And they said, we need somebody to make sure we're meeting the regulatory requirements and shipping it properly because stuff's not getting into Europe. And I'm like, well, that might be because you need to be CE marked and you're not. Yeah. Maybe you need to make sure you're paying your taxes. There's that VAT that you have to have. And and you have to fill out the paperwork correctly. Get it through customs. That helps. Mm-hmm. And there are certain requirements for shipping pallet quantities there. So they end up getting there intact. So they were like, you're a smart guy. You can do this. And I was like, I don't know anything about quality. I just know that this isn't how you do it.
It's not quality. What we're doing is not quality.
Yeah. So very quickly, I had all these roles. And over time, we brought in other people. We brought in an operations manager. We brought in an engineering manager. But there was nobody that was really good in quality and regulatory. And I was like, what did I do? I got myself into a job I didn't really want, but I was good at it. But that paid off because then I knew how purchasing worked because I had done that. I'd worn that hat a lot. Mm-hmm. And I knew how operations worked and I knew how sterilization worked. And I knew all these things because when you're a company of 5, you have to do everything at some point. So, somebody's out and I'll go off to Penske and I'll get a truck and I'll take our pallets up to the sterilizer because there's nobody else to do it.
It's the best way to learn, by the way. We're getting those small companies and wearing so many hats. I think it has been the most revealing and propelling thing in my career so far, which has given me that advantage of that level of understanding, exposure. Don't neglect those type of working environment. They're a pain, they're a burden, but then again, your growth is exponential from that point on. And you're very correct. Once you know the process, it's so much easier as an auditor to audit and capture those.
When I interview somebody for regulatory affairs, I just keep on asking questions until I get to the point where they can't answer the question. That tells me where their knowledge is. I don't expect them to know everything. Eventually, there's something I don't know, but I can keep on asking questions until I get to that level. Mm-hmm. When I'm going to audit or I'm going to hire somebody or ask somebody to go audit purchasing, one of the things I like to do is keep on asking questions about purchasing until I get to where they can't answer the question. And so, unfortunately, if they don't know what a purchase order is, what a purchase requisition is, and what an item master is, and a bill of materials, and when I say, did you look at the BOM? And they give me this blank deer in the headlights kind of look, that's not good.
Yeah, it's not a good sign.
We don't have you auditing purchasing if you don't know what a bomb is. Yep, you're not ready yet.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
No, but you and me, we've worked in a lot of startups, and we got exposed to all that. So we had to put on our quality hat, look at the BOM. We had to review and approve the BOM. We had to edit the BOM when we made a design change. So we've seen the BOM 27 times. We know what it is. Yeah. It's not BOM, it's bill of materials, and it has the list of all the components on there, and we know how important that is. I've gone in there and had permission to edit an entire item master. That's not something most people do if they're internal auditors.
Correct. And just to piggyback on that, to actually give the value of using an external or somebody who's totally off the, who's not involved in the process, like you said, we go over certain documentation so many times over that we know it by heart. But if there was ever an error, or if there was ever something that needed to be addressed, because we're so used to the process, it's not even the fact that we're actually executing the activity. It's the fact that we've got so familiar and accustomed to it that we don't have the right set of eyes to pick up on nonconformances or anything like that. So that's the value you get from getting somebody totally independent. And I will promote it. Yes, a consultant who's really not even, accustomed or familiar with your company and what it is you do, really has no stake, no conflict of interest whatsoever, so that they look at it from a fresh set of eyes, as opposed to, I've been doing this for the past, a lot of companies I see, they're like, oh, we've been doing this for the past 10, 15 years. We know what we do. I get that. I'm not actually questioning your expertise or your experience. I'm just pointing something to your process that you haven't been doing correctly, and it goes under the radar for years. And well, it's funny, nobody ever told us that, because you got familiar with it and nobody really looked at it differently. So
in our company, we have 12 people. Out of that group, Mary Votter has audited there's a client, I won't say their name, just they're in Vermont. There's a client in Vermont that Mary's audited. I audited them. Matthew's acting quality manager for them right now, and he's audited them last year. Sharon might be auditing them someday. But when we were having a closing meeting during an audit last week, I was like, next year we might have Vanessa here, because he hasn't been here yet. And because I hadn't been there since like 2015, there were all kinds of things I was seeing. Wow, this is so much improved from before. And this, you haven't changed since then. And that's not good. And so I saw things that other people didn't, because they had been looking at it and helping them with 510Ks and helping them with other things. So they were too close to it, even though they're an outside consultant.
Correct.
And so when I came back after 5 years and looked at stuff, I saw things that they didn't. So it was just a fresh set of eyes. And I think you haven't worked with a client at all in any capacity. So you would come in and have a completely clean slate and see things that none of us have seen. So it's just really cool to have such an experienced quality and regulatory auditing team with so many high-level skilled auditors, and we can rotate out for 4 or 5 years and never have the same auditor in there twice.
Yeah, definitely. Different perspective.
It's really a cool experience. And like, who did this? Oh, Matthew did this one. Who did the one before that? Mary did that one. And who did it before that? Oh, I did that one. And then you see each one of us saw different things, and we're all from the same company, but we saw it differently because we're different people.
Yeah. And it's a snapshot, right? We don't get to see everything.
I always say it's a sample. It's always a sample. And we only can look at so many records during that period of time. And we all have our hot buttons, and we all have our focus. So if, for instance, the 14971 standard changes, everybody's going to be hyper-focused on, 14971, risk management. And the MDR comes out and comes into effect, and everybody's focused on MDR requirements. Forget all that other stuff, because it's not on my radar screen right now. I'm focused on it. Don't disrupt me. So I think that's really important you got to remember, it's important to go systematically through the standard and make sure you covered all of the standard if your job is to do a full quality system audit.
Correct.
That's one of the important things, and I often use a checklist just to make sure I didn't forget one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is to remember it's just a sampling. So just because I caught something doesn't mean it's broken, and just because I didn't find something doesn't mean everything's working correctly. And I have my own personal preferences in theories, and Matthew has different ones, and Mary has different ones. I know you have different ones, but because we're all auditing to the same standard and the same criteria, we do have a certain level of competence and expectations that are appropriate for this industry.
Correct.
And that's what you need. You can't just pull somebody off the street and say, go on Udemy, take you 30-minute quality auditing course, pass your true or false quiz, get your PDF certificate, and we'll make you an auditor. So we don't have to hire that consulting firm that's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, technically that could work, but good luck.
Yeah, it's a lot to.
This won't be there.
Correct. But some companies do that, and someone said, "Oh, can we do that?" I said, "Well, you could, but make sure that they're qualified to do the work. So if it means they take that 50 minutes, 60 minutes, or 2-hour training webinar, and you send them out to the wolves, I'm not quite sure you could defend that in front of an auditor. But if you do that and then you shadow them, it shows that they were next to you, or they see the different methodologies of how to ask questions, how to prompt them to give you whatever answer you want, but over a certain period of time. There's different ways to go about it, but definitely that wouldn't be my recommendation. Yeah, watch something for 30 minutes and you're good to go. Because at the end of the day, you're only hurting the company when you're doing that.
If you think of it as we're making life-saving devices, we're trying to save people's lives, but we're going to save a few bucks and put somebody through the cheapest possible training we can to meet a requirement. And the whole purpose of the audit is to make sure that we're doing things the right way and to make sure our process is effective. We've just taken the biggest shortcut we possibly can by not making sure the person that's checking us is qualified.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of like, okay, we're running out of money, and we're opening a new restaurant, and we need to save money. So let's go out and get a bunch of frozen prepared food. That will get food on the table, but when the critic comes for opening night, the review won't be pretty.
It won't be pretty.
Yeah, and so in this case, we're making medical devices, and the review is somebody died. And that's not what we want when we have medical device manufacturers. We want products that work and don't cause problems. They save lives, and they solve illnesses and cure people. That's what we want. And that's why I got into the medical device industry is, yeah, it pays well. Yeah, we get to work in nice office environments, or we get to work in a clean room that's pristine clean. But the big reason is it saves money. I mean, not saves money, but saves lives. So in particularly, my biggest area is anything that's pediatric. So if it's a product that's going to save children's lives, or I worked with one company where if they had this disorder and they had this implant, they would keep their leg. If they didn't get this implant, they lose their leg. And you tell a kid that's not even a teenager yet that this is their life. If I give you this implant, you keep your leg. If I don't give you this implant, you lose your leg. That's life-changing, and you don't give them a substandard part. It's not, well, it might be sterile.
No.
It might have endotoxin, it might not. So if it has endotoxin, you might get septic shock and die. Maybe it's okay. That's not the answer I want.
Nah, that's not the answer the FDA wants, or you don't want to be on the radar. So yeah.
No. So there is a reason why the auditors are important and do a really good job.
Definitely.
We got 10 minutes left here before I get done. Yeah, you were worried we weren't going to be able to fill up the time.
I said, do you think we'll be? Well, yeah, we caught up quick.
So, how long does it take to get your ISO 13480? So I come to you as a medical device contract manufacturer. I have a quality system, but I'm not certified yet. I have a quality system, but I'm not certified. How long is it going to take me to get that piece of paper that says I'm 1345?
In these days or a couple of years ago, because things have changed a little bit.
You can answer both ways. It's a good answer.
You know what? It varies. First of all, you have to be able to find a registrar that's going to take you up. And not to say it's not going to happen, but things have been a little bit. There's a couple of bottlenecks here and there, especially with the MDR coming into effect. Let's not kid ourselves. Unless you was already a customer from a registrar, which you're just adding on a new standard, or you were ISO 9001, they also certified to ISO 1345. It might be a little bit quicker, but granted that you found your registrar, your quality system is already in place, you've done your internal audit, identified gaps and addressed them to go into the stage 1. I think the question is more about how soon can you get into stage 2? And I've seen it vary from a month, 6 weeks. That was the shortest I've seen, all the way up to 6 months. Standard, 2-3 months. But I've seen 6 months, and I've even seen a year. And that's the joke, is that even after a year, that company did not address it adequately, and it was postponed to another 6 months. So that whole part of your CAPA system, to be proactively, without undue delay, addressing certain non-conformances, going through the whole CAPA to make sure that it's been resolved, it's been addressed, it's been verified, so that you've eliminated any potential risk of those recurring non-conformances, is detrimental in you fast tracking or going to your stage 2. So I think my answer would be in terms of the maturity of your quality management system. How well have you been able to maintain it? If it's a new company, definitely there'll be some tweaking to do along the way. But average 2 to 3 months. And they're going in, and might I add, coming out of the stage 1, if there are any areas of concern that they call, and I've seen companies, area of concern, but we're not going to address them. Hello, if they say it's an area of concern, that means you need to address it to go further. If not, you need to give a pretty good rationale as far as why you are not putting those recommendations in place in order to help you go to the stage 1, or put the SIPSs in place so that you can start implementing the system. And I think it's a good idea to kind of clarify what implementation means. You need to put a procedure in place, but you need then to test it. You need to actually use it. And when you use it, you're actually generating the records that the auditor then is going to come and then audit to make sure that your procedure said, I'm going to do this, and you actually have the evidence that you've done it. So your procedure is telling you what to do, how to do it, and your record says, okay, this is how we did it based on our procedure XYZ. So this is the exercise that at the stage 2, depending on the maturity, if you've addressed any non-conformances or not, or different, I'm not going to say different severity, but how well you've implemented your quality management system. Your stage 2 could vary between 2-3 months, and then from that point on, you go into your stage 2, have your records on hand, everybody's here, not panicking. Also, the behavior you should have, when you're going through those audits. Do you see a lot? Do you not see a lot? Do you see the wrong stuff? These are all key aspects that could help you pass your inspection, because sometimes you talk too much and you see things that steers the auditor a certain way. And I love sniffing in places. I just need to hear one thing, and then I'll go a certain path. And
follow that audit trail and be very persistent.
I will follow that trail, and surely enough, I'll find something. So these are some of the things to consider.
In the chat down there, notified body versus certification body, and you mentioned MDR.
Right.
Can you explain to people what the difference is when the contract manufacturer can go for either one of these, but a company that needs CE marking, not so much. So what's the difference?
Right. So I'll take an example for a company that's outside of Europe. They get certified to, let's just say, ISO 1345, which is a standard that the CE marking would recognize. So what happens is the registrar, the certifying body, will come and audit you to that standard, make sure that your quality management system meets the ISO, but also some of the requirements of the MDR. So you can look at it as a certification body, the entity that certifies your quality management system, and your notified body is the agency that will review your technical documentation. One is QMS related, the other one is device related. One is going to review your regulatory submission. The other one is going to see the adequacy of your quality management system in place. And those two entities speak to each other. So one will say, yeah, their quality management system is in place. You can issue the equivalent of an ISO 1345 certificate in Europe, which we call an EC certificate. So along with your EC certificate, there will be different a product list of the different CE mark product that you have that are deemed marketable or commercialized or CE marked in Europe. So that's basically the difference. As opposed to a CMO doesn't need a notified body. He just needs a certification body or registrar to just leverage the fact that their quality management system in place is adequate to either design, develop, even distribute, the product, but not for as a legal manufacturer.
Now they do have some auditors that do both. They have some auditors that can both do the technical file review and the quality system review.
Yeah.
But companies like BSI, they've chosen to split it up. They said this is a technical file auditor. This is an operations auditor that just does the quality system. And they even have a microbiology auditor that specializes in sterilization and sterilization validation. So they've gone one extra step of separating things. But it's true, like a CMO, a contract manufacturing organization, they don't need a notified body. They can work with a certification body. But sometimes your customer may say, we would prefer that you have a notified body, even though you don't need one, because that way we know the quality of the company that did your ISO 1345 audit is very good, not just anybody.
Correct.
Because there were a whole lot of notified bodies that are no longer notified bodies because they weren't so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
There used to be over 80. I used to have a business card that had all the logos of the different notified bodies on it. And it had over 70, it was like 72 or 77 notified bodies on that card. Well, now there's like 12 of those left. And so it shows you over time, a lot of those companies went by the wayside. They still, some of them exist, but they're not notified bodies. They're just certification bodies now. So they offer 9001 or they offer some other kind of quality system service, but they can't offer CE marking certificates or EC certificates anymore.
Yeah. And I heard also the notified body designation got a lot tougher to get qualified. So that's why
purposely made it tough to weed out the undesirables, if you will, that really were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And there was even some fraud where people were being bribed to get a certificate. And there was a fairly famous article with a reporter going on undercover, I believe in the Czech Republic for that particular instance. And there were a lot of people saying, the Turkish notified bodies, they're crap or whatever. They're not going to make it into this process. But I actually had the pleasure of going to Turkey in Ankara and actually training the TSE auditors. And I can tell you from the 25 auditors that I trained, they were top-notch auditors. So you can't even generalize in a country. You can have one that doesn't make the cut and another one that is really top-notch. But the process isn't cheap either. So just because they chose not to make the transition to the MDR doesn't necessarily mean they're not good. It might just mean they said, I don't have this much money.
Well, there is a budget aspect to consider.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier on, it's not a cheap system. It adds a lot of value, but don't think it's alone on its own.
And companies have said, some of them said, we're not doing CE marking. We're not going to renew. And that's part of MDR.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our hour here. So thank you very, very much, Vanessa. That was awesome to have you on board. Go ahead and add your comment with this post, so you have your contact information there if anybody that wants to reach her. But your name, it's Vanessa Lucien, and Vanessa's quality system and regulatory consultant up in the Montreal area. And thank you for joining Medical Device Live this week. As a last note, we have reached the end of the month, and the new month begins. Every month we have a topic, a general topic that we try to cover in our blogs and in our videos. So for the last month, we've been beating people to death with FDA inspections. And so next month, we're covering things a little bit different. Next month, the topic of discussion is going to be cybersecurity. So you will see a lot more posts on software, 62304 is the standard. You'll see TIR 57 from AMI. You're going to see cybersecurity in general. You're going to see the FDA guidance documents. You're going to hear about AI software difficulties. So that's really going to be kind of a new area for us. And I'm pretty excited about it because it's very popular with our clients. And we have a thank you, Vanessa, from Sharon here. Let me put that up there for everybody.
Thank you. I don't think I get the chat box, but
well, I have ultimate power.
Oh, well, I don't know. I put my contact information, but I don't think I saw it. I put it in a little box here, but I don't think I have it.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have to debug that on a private session, you and me, and that way next time you show up, we'll make sure we have it. But I will definitely make sure we have you lined up in the comments there, and so people know how to reach you. But yeah, Sharon said the perfect words. Like, thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, everybody, and see you next week, Friday live. Okay.
Perfect. Bye-bye. Have a good one.